are you?
Oh, thank you, Ilsa, for a very kind introduction. I'm doing very well. Yeah, thank you for having me on your show.
That's really nice. I'm gonna start immediately with the first question. I had a question myself. This is my first question that I'm gonna do, and then we're going on with the listeners. How do we know that what we hear or what we receive is channeling, or is it just our ego, our mind who's talking to us? How do we difference this?
So in my experience, the two are very different in the way they appear to us. So I give examples sometimes of an apple and an orange, right? They're two very different things, and you know what an apple is because of how it looks and how it smells and how it tastes. Right? You know an orange because of its qualities. Well, the same thing happens when we look at our own personal mind and when we look at the higher self mind. So the higher self sounds different. The voice will actually sound different than your usual voice that you hear inside your head when you have your own personal thoughts. It'll also communicate in different words. The higher self will not have the same type of personality as your own human mind does. It'll feel different energetically. It'll often feel very loving, very peaceful. It'll feel like it's caring for you. And sometimes, as you know, our personal thoughts might be angry or upset or judgmental or afraid or just flat, not having much energy expression. So the higher self always feels very caring, very kind, very loving, and very supportive. There's also a type of wisdom to the higher self's communication. Its words will carry this wisdom, this knowledge, because the purpose of the higher self is really to support us in our own path of awakening. And that's not just our own personal awakening in ourselves, like building a higher understanding about who we are. It's really an awakening in the fullness of our experience. So how we live in this world, how we create the experiences of our lives, and how we interact with each other. So there's a wisdom, there's a care, a loving kindness. We notice that it sounds different. And for some people who are sensitive to the non-physical energy, you may actually feel like this higher communication is coming down into your head from above your body. So the higher self's wisdom is related to higher chakras within us. And oftentimes when we have this higher self communication, it does feel like we're communicating down from above. For those of us who have maybe been aware of our ego mind or personality mind, you'll notice that you often feel the energy coming from your abdominal area. So most of our emotions and our emotional reactions and our human conditioning, it's really felt in these lower chakras. And then that energy rises up to our head, and that's when we hear that personality. So the higher self comes from above us because it's not really human conditioned from what our physical body has seen and heard and experienced in the world. The higher self's above our body, and then it comes into us and offers us this wisdom and guidance. And then the lower mind, I call it the lower mind because it's in these lower chakras, that then rises up and communicates into our brain this way. Often the higher self helps us to have the greatest experience in the future, and then the lower self, that ego mind, it keeps us repeating the past. So if we're listening to the lower mind, we'll find that we don't really grow much in an understanding. We have the same situations appear over and over and over again. Whereas if we listen to the higher self, we see that we are growing a lot and we're evolving our experiences and reaching our personal goals. So there's lots of different qualities that are different between the personal mind and the lower mind. I think some of the challenges that people have is they try to judge the information only. And if the information sounds spiritual, right, then it's the higher self. And if it sounds human or if it has problems in it or incorrect logic in it, right, then it's the lower mind. I think this human mind, this conscious mind, is heavily invested in logic and reason, and it likes to judge everything. It likes to know yes or no or right or wrong, and sometimes that gets in the way. So instead of thinking, is an apple good or is an apple bad, right? Is an orange good or is an orange bad? Which one's better, an apple or an orange, right? Instead of just judging it as yes, no, good, bad, right, or wrong, we can really come into a greater perceptual experience of the apple and the orange. Right? We can come into a greater perceptual experience of the higher self and the lower self and really understand what each's purpose is. in our own human evolution, we're not rejecting our past. Our past is actually the catalyst for our awakening and our growth. So we really need to embrace our past because it helps us understand who we are and how we got here, and also how we want to move forward in our lives. We don't just throw out the orange because it's an orange. No, we honor the orange. We honor our past just being what it is. We appreciate the past. We appreciate our human understanding. It's really that energy of appreciation that allows us to connect into ourselves with greater love. And that love from our conscious self into our body, into these chakras in our body where the lower self-intelligence is held, that really facilitates this human awakening experience. I often tell people that the higher self is like our future self. It's taking us to the greater future that we desire to have. And the lower self is like the past self. And we're essentially evolving from our past into that greater future. We're using our intuition and our higher guidance to transform our human lives. And in doing so, it evolves our human understanding. We feel happier, more blissful and peaceful emotions in our body. And we really become a more evolved human being. I think sometimes people separate too much, the higher self and the lower self, and think one or the other. I have to get rid of one, I have to seek the other, and often that causes more problems. If we realize all of my mind has higher mind, lower mind, and middle mind, like future, past, and present. If I understand that all of my intelligence has these parts, then I can really honor all the pieces and integrate them together to really have the most effective human experience.
Wow, that's interesting. Yeah, I heard it already. When we ask, when we go into judgment and we ask and we look for the no, yes, this is good, this I mean, then we are talking out of the mind. Yeah.
Yeah.